Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 261 for the 13th of Av in a leap year. So circumcision, a bris, giving a baby boy a bris after 8 days of being born, is probably the most obscure and difficult to understand commandments in Judaism. While there can be a lot of questions that come up surrounding this particular commandment, the one that I'm going to bring up today, first and foremost, is why would God put a child into the world that's imperfect, in a sense, that needs something done to it? So if God wanted a child to be circumcised, then why wouldn't God just create a child to be circumcised just like that? Like, why do we have to have the child undergo this whole really intense surgical procedure? And this really actually points to a much broader question in terms of our lives here in this world and our role here on earth. We know that this comes up often in Judaism and discussions that come up in terms of the creation of the world, that God purposefully actually created our world imperfect. He did not create a perfect world. He created one which needs a lot of work. And he specifically endowed us with the power and with the capacity and with the role of fixing and perfecting our world. And that's really what the mitzvah of circumcision really points to, really alludes to, is this idea that we're not perfect. We're not here in this world. The world is not perfect, but that doesn't exempt us of trying to fix it. He actually wants us to be partners in his creation of perfecting ourselves. So today we're actually really going to delve into this mitzvah of circumcision, but on a really, really deep level, and how while there is this specific literal mitzvah that applies to boys at 8 days old, and why it's not relevant for girls is a discussion for another time. But there's this other idea of circumcision that really can apply to all of us, even if we're way beyond that age of actual literal circumcision. And that's the circumcision of our heart. And there's a really strong parallel between these two ideas, these ideas of the literal circumcision that happens to a baby and the circumcision that we need to engage in pretty much throughout our lives in our hearts. So what do I mean by this? So the whole idea of circumcision in general, if you think about it, I mean, where is the circumcision? It's in a male, their sexual organ, right? That's where it happens to be quite explicit. And the idea of sexuality in general is really what you can think about is all about pleasure, right? I mean, there's the idea of procreation and all that stuff, but essentially, if we want to be really real about it, it's about pleasure. And the idea of a circumcision for a boy is that we're not saying that you should not have pleasure here in this world. Of course, we're in a world and God wants us to live our lives and to live a life that's enjoyable to us. And that is, while we do have a purpose here, we do have a role in our lives, he wants us to enjoy ourselves along the way. We need to curb this pleasure, and we need to make sure that it doesn't become overly indulgent, overly hedonistic. And that's really ultimately one of the big ideas behind circumcision, is kind of curbing this pleasure so that it doesn't go over the top. It doesn't become hedonistic, that there's always this like awareness of God, and that really our entire pleasure is actually ultimately, if we really want to take it to the ultimate extreme, is being channeled towards godliness, towards our purpose, that they're not two separate things. So what this means to us on a spiritual level is that for us as well, spiritually speaking, we need to try to embody this idea, to try to embody this level of being where we circumcise, where we kind of sacrifice our entire lives to God in a sense. And again, that doesn't mean that we're not going to experience pleasure along the way, but it actually means that we are just having a little bit more of a refined type of pleasure. So now in the mitzvah of circumcision, interestingly enough, there are actually two components to it. There's the component of milah, which is the removal of the outer layer of the foreskin. And then there's the component of what's known as priya, which is the removal of a more fine, thinner membrane. And there's this idea in the mitzvah of circumcision that you need both, and that if you just do the outer part, the milah part, and not the priya, then you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. So we're going to talk today about what these two components of circumcision have to do, how they apply to our lives, and how we can encompass these things on a spiritual level. And ultimately what this is going to point to is, once again, this running theme that we've seen a lot in Iggeres HaKodesh so far, and it's going to continue to be a theme, is giving tzedakah, interestingly enough, and the great power of giving tzedakah. So in brief, the way that we can kind of understand these two layers, like the kind of two layers of the membrane, which we can think of the first one as being like the outer layer, the more coarse layer is like that more outer layer. And then there's the finer layer, which is, we can think of as the inner layer. We can think of this in terms of our hearts as well, that we have like an outer part of our heart, an outer part of our emotions, which is this more like external, superficial type of passion that we can have, which the Alter Rebbe defines as being more intellectually based. These are things that we get really passionate about, maybe different ideas, maybe if you're very political, if you have strong opinions on things, or even when it comes to God, if you have this intellectual based passion about something, this is going to be the outer layer of your heart. The inner layer of your heart is a lot more subtle. It's a lot more essential to who you are. And it's not necessarily something rational. It's actually not rational at all. This is like a love that a parent might have for a child. This is a love that a person will have for something that's so precious to them that it's beyond reason. It's like if somebody tries to attack or contradict that thing, the person will get like irrationally upset. It's like it's not a reasonable thing. It's not something that like you can be explained through logic or reason. So we can all relate to this in some way if we think about different things in our lives. Like when we think about our passions, what are the passions in our lives that we are passionate about that are intellectually based, and what are the things in our lives that we're passionate about that go way beyond intellect, that are way more subtle than that? It may not be so clear at first where things are coming from, but if you think about it, then it might become clearer to you. So now while it's true that there are these two levels of passion for anything in the world, really just any type of worldly thing, any type of concept or idea or thing, that this applies to our relationship with God as well, because that's always what we bring it back to, right? And how we're trying to cultivate this relationship with God. And we've talked about at length about how to cultivate a relationship with God and a love of God that is intellectually based. And that's something that is within the capacity of every person. We all have the ability to learn more about God, to study Chassidus like you're doing right now, right? And the more we study these things, the more passionate we'll become about God, the more we'll understand these ideas, and it will kind of infuse it into our lives, and we'll be just kind of thinking about these things all the time. So that's great. That's really good. And that's what we can liken to this first level of the circumcision. Like we can parallel it to the circumcision, which is called milah, the circumcision of the coarse outer layer of the membrane. So it's like we are basically circumcising the outer layer of our hearts. We're taking this more external level of our passion, the passions of our heart, and we're curbing them to being passionate about God on an intellectual level. But now, what about the more internal level? What does this mean, spiritually speaking? This is a love of God that, just like when a parent has a love of a child that is totally beyond reason, that's not intellectually based at all. This is the love of God that we we all have essentially, and we've talked about this elsewhere as well, that's beyond intellect, that's beyond any kind of comprehension, that's really essential to who we are. It's our pintel yid, as they call it, as that little spark within us that's like that we would give our lives for God. It's a life or death kind of thing. And this level is not as easy to access, at least not in this more linear, progressive way. It's not something that we can access purely by meditation alone. About this level, it actually talks about how there's a phrase that says Umal Hashem elokechem et levavchem, that Hashem will circumcise our heart. It actually comes from the outside. It actually comes from God. Only God can circumcise our heart, or our heart on that level. So what does that mean? This means that there's an active component to circumcision of our hearts, which is this intellectual type of work that we do. But then there's another level that's more about us receiving the circumcision from God. But nevertheless, what we'll learn today is there actually is an active component that can help us to initiate this from God, that can make us receptive to God circumcising us on this deeper level of what we know as Priya. And what is that? What is it that we can do in order to make ourselves more receptive and to kind of like show initiative and allow God to circumcise our hearts on this deeper level? This is giving tzedakah. Because why? Because what is tzedakah? Tzedakah is when you give charity. What are you giving charity? You're giving charity. Charity is money. Where do you get your money from? For most of us anyways, it's through our work. It's through the work that we do. And the work that we do is really intrinsic in very many ways to who we are. So I know people don't like to like identify with their profession and things like that, but think about it. For most of us who work, it's like your entire, they call it your livelihood for a reason. It's like you're literally putting so much effort, so much energy, so many hours, so many everything into your work that you do, into the money that you have. And even if, let's say, you're being supported by somebody else, we've talked about this before. Let's say you have a trust fund, or let's say you are a minor, or whatever, for whatever reason that you're being supported by somebody else. Nevertheless, that money that you have, that support that you have, is really essential to your life. We need to eat to survive, right? We need a house, we need clothes. All these things cost money. And this is essential to keeping us, sustaining us in our lives. So when we actually give up our money, this is in a small way, us giving up our life. So this is a level of self-sacrifice. And so when we exhibit this self-sacrifice through tzedakah. So tzedakah is literally a way that we can tap into this level of self-sacrifice, of mesiras nefesh. So when we do this, this instigates this process of the Priya. So it's not that we ourselves are doing the Priya, the circumcision of the inner layer of our heart, but we're kind of opening ourselves up. We're making ourselves vulnerable to God coming in and sacrificing that inner level of our heart and connecting with him on this essential level. The way that it's likened to is sort of like this, when we talk about the Arousal dilatata, the arousal from below that initiates an arousal from above. It's likened to the Arousal dilatata is like the female and the male. So it's like we're the female and God is the male, that we're kind of like, as the female, we're just like, we're making ourselves open to him. We're making ourselves open to God's advances, so to speak. Just like it's in dating, lahavdil, that if you have a man and a woman, it's, people often think that it's like the man is chasing after the woman. And while that might be true to a certain extent, the woman needs to show that she's available to be chased. That's really kind of where it starts. So here as well, in order to allow for God to circumcise that inner level of our heart, we show that we're ready. We show that we're available by making ourselves available, by giving tzedakah. So with all of that being said, let's get into the text for today and see how the Alter Rebbe explains this. It's pretty long, so get ready. This is, for context, this is Epistle 4 of Iggeres HaKodesh. And so, and once again, this is a letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote to his Chassidim, really with the point, again, of really encouraging them to give tzedakah. That's the bottom line of this letter, as it is with many other letters. So the Alter Rebbe begins with a teaching of the Rambam that is found in Hilchos Matanos Evyonim, where it says, En Israel nigalin ela bitstaka, that the Jewish people are not redeemed without staka by virtue. So it's staka which redeems the Jewish people, and the proof to back this up is actually from a pasuk in Yeshayahu chapter 1 verse 27, which says Veshaveh bitstaka, which means and her captives will be redeemed through tzedakah. So there's something about tzedakah that has the power to redeem. So we're going to learn about what this means. So then the Alter Rebbe brings another pasuk, and this one is from Tehillim, chapter 85, verse 14, which says, Tzedek lefanav yalech. That means that tzedek will go before him. That's the literal translation. But then we want to get into the technical, if you have to actually look at the Hebrew, and this is where translations are always very limiting in a certain sense, where it says, Tzedek lefanav yahalech, tzedek will go before him. It's a much simpler way, like a more straightforward way to say this, that tzedek will go before him, is if it would have said, Tzedek lefanav yelech. Those of you that know Hebrew, that would be like, literally, tzedek walks before him. But it doesn't say yelech, it says yahalech. So why? Why does it say yahalech? So yelech is like walking. It's like an active state of walking. Yahalech kind of connotes this idea that something is making it walk. Some other entity is like is causing it to walk. So what is this talking about? So to understand this, the Alter Rebbe brings another verse. This is another citation. This is also from Tehillim, chapter 27, verse 8, where it says, Lecha amar libi bakshu fanai, which says, on your behalf, my heart says, seek my face. So what does this mean? So my face, so this has come up before, panai. There's another meaning to the word panai. Face, the word face in Hebrew, panim, is related to the word pnimius, to inward. So meaning to say that when we say like seek my face, the real understanding is that you're supposed to seek out, to ask for the inwardness of the heart. So what does this mean? So now when we talk about the passion that is coming from the element of fire, the godly element of fire that's found in the heart, and then in brackets there's just like this like alternate wording for this. So it's this idea of like the passion, the fire in the heart and in the godly soul. So the Alter Rebbe says there are two aspects to this passion of the heart. There's the external aspect, and then there's the inner aspect. What's the external aspect? The external aspect is the passion and the excitement that comes about through Bina and Das, through understanding and knowledge about the greatness of God, blessed be He, the infinite one, blessed be He. To be able to really meditate upon God's greatness, and to have from this meditation, from this intellect, to give birth to what we know as tvuna. This is like an emotional feeling. This is a great feeling of love that is like the flashing flames of fire. Okay, so that's the external aspect of the love of God, of the heart. Then there's the inner part of the heart. What's the inner part of the heart? The inner part of the heart is the really inner part of the heart that's called like the depths of the heart, the umka deliba in Hebrew. And this is totally above intellect. So this is not something rational, and this is not something that a person can meditate about. This is beyond that level of meditation. And to this level of love is what is alluded to in a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 130, verse 1, where it says, "Mimamakim keratecha Hashem." From the depths do I call upon you, God. So from the depths, this is referring to the umka deliba, the depths of the heart. And now the Alter Rebbe in brackets here says that we can understand this by way of analogy, that just like in terms of worldly matters, right? So we talked about that in the introduction, that there's some things that are so important to a person that it's like they affect him and they touch him. They're so personal to him that they really are like in the inner part of the person's heart. So, and they cause a person to sometimes do things that are totally irrational, right? So it's like, think about like what people would do for their parents, or parents would do for their children, or things like that. It's like we care about these things so much that it's not even rational. We would do things that are totally irrational for their sake because they touch us so much. So just like this, that we have these things in worldly matters and like physical life, it's so too is it when we talk about the service of the heart of God, when we talk about our relationship with God and our love of God, that meaning to say that this aspect of the inner part of the heart is totally above intellect, totally above knowledge, and the emotions that come about through intellect. But rather, what is it then? If it's totally above intellect, where is it coming from? What's it about? So it's actually a ray of the supernal chokhmah that is above understanding and das. So again, in that map of the spheros, so the spheros, the three intellectual attributes are chokhmah, bina, and das. So wisdom and understanding and knowledge is how they're commonly translated, but it's actually, it's hard. Again, translations are very limited. So it's like when we meditate, we really actually start with the second one leading into the third. So we start with our bina. Bina is our understanding. This is where we try to contemplate and understand and analyze and all that stuff. And that leads to our sense of knowledge, of like really appreciating something. But chokhmah is above that. Chokhmah can be thought of as more of that spark of inspiration, of intuition, that kind of thing. So too above are there those spheres, just like we embody these spheres in our own lives, in our own self. So for God, this level of chokhmah is really beyond intellect. It's something that supersedes intellect, supersedes rational understanding, and so this is what we are tapping into when we talk about this inner level of the heart. And so within this supernal chokhmah that we're talking about is actually found vested and is hidden the light of God himself. As is written, Hashem bechokhmah yesad aretz. This is from Mishlei chapter 3 verse 19, that God founded the earth with his chokhmah. So it's like this is the source of all of creation, is chokhmah, really. And this is, to make it really straightforward, this is the spark of God that is found in every single Jewish person. It's the pintel yid of every single person. Okay, so far, right, just to recap so far, we've learned that there are two levels of passion towards God within our hearts. There's the external level, which is like this love that we generate through intellect and intellectual understanding and all of that stuff, and meditation upon God. And then there's this more essential inner layer, which is more essential. It's super irrational. It's where we would like literally give our lives for the sake of God, just like we can think of it as a parent giving their lives for their children if needed. Now the Alter Rebbe goes on and he says that not everybody merits to achieve this deeper level of God, this love of the umka de liba, from the depths of the heart, in a way of true inwardness. But why? Why can not everybody access it? It's because this level of God, like the godliness found in every person, is in a way of exile. This is the exile of the Shekhinah, the indwelling Shekhinah, the indwelling of God, which is because this is the spark of what is the spark of every Jewish person. Like when we talk about this pintel yid, the spark of Jewishness, the spark of godliness within all of us, this is the Shekhinah. And the Shekhinah is in Galus, unfortunately. Why? Why is the Shekhinah in Galus? Because as the sages taught, and this is in the Gemara from Megillah, page 29a, Galu levavel Shekhinah imahem, that when the Jewish people were exiled into Babylon, then the Shekhinah went with them. So it's like God is together with us in exile. And interestingly, it specifically talks about the exile of Babylon, of Bavel, because Bavel is made up of the word that's actually, from what I understand, the word to babble actually comes from Bavel, like the Tower of Bavel. That actually is like when everybody, the languages of the world got all mixed up and nobody understood each other. That's the epitome of Galus. That's the epitome of the exile that we're in, is this exile of Bavel, this exile of Babel, of incomprehension. Everything's muddled, everything's mixed up. And so the fact that we're in exile, this actually causes the Shekhinah to be in exile as well. And so because the Shekhinah is in exile, this is why this level of the umka de liba, which is really ultimately the Shekhinah, is not something that's accessible to everybody. Because why not? Like, so how is it that this level of the heart is in Shekhinah? So historically it's like, okay, we were in a Babylonian exile and everything like that. But here on a spiritual, deeper level, it's actually something that we're doing to ourselves. It's where a person actually vests this inner aspect of their heart, this umka deliba, and they're vesting it in foreign garments, in soiled garments of the pleasures of the world, which are known as bavel. So it's like if a person, like this irrational feeling of love that that we're supposed to have for God, if a person channels this instead towards worldly things, has this like irrational passion for whatever it is. I'm not going to give examples, but everybody can think of it on their own. Like when people are just like irrationally, like their whole life is like about a certain thing that is very worldly. That's the epitome of exile. That's like where the exile of the Shekhinah is really present in that person, unfortunately. And this is likened to the foreskin that covers up the sexual organ of a boy, and this and it covers up the inner aspect of the heart. So this is why now we're coming into this whole idea of circumcision. This is why it says, and this is from Devarim chapter 10 verse 16, where it says umaltem et aglat levavchem, that you should circumcise the foreskin of your heart. So interesting. Even in scripture, it talks about how this idea of circumcision is not just a type of circumcision for the boy, for his sexual organ, but it actually is something that we need to do for our hearts as well. And so just to kind of recap that, so it's like when we talk about like why do we need to do a circumcision of our heart, because this level of passion that we have that's supposed to be directed for God is, unfortunately, when it's in exile, we're passionate about things that have nothing to do with God, that are just like very worldly. And this could be like an external type of passion, or it can be a really internal type of passion, like where people are really irrationally passionate about things that are very worldly and very ungodly. So how do we circumcise our hearts? What does that mean? So we know that in regular circumcision, so we talked about this in the introduction, there are two aspects. There's the aspect of milah, which is known as excision, and there's the aspect of priya, which is uncovering. So milah is the idea of uncovering the coarse foreskin. Like it's like the basic first level of the circumcision of the bris. And then the priya is the uncovering of the more thinner membrane. And so when we talk about the foreskin of the heart, then we also know that it's, what is this like more thinner membrane? These are the more subtle desires that are coarse also. So we see that there's also these two, like just like in a physical circumcision, we need these two aspects of milah and priya. We have to do both in our hearts as well. And there's a teaching of the sages in the Gemara and in the Mishnah where it says, mal velo faraki ilu lo mal, that if a person performs circumcision and just does that first step of milah without the priya, it's as if they didn't do the circumcision at all. So you need both in order for it to be a kosher circumcision. And so too when it comes to our hearts, is that it's not enough for us to just like sit and study and learn about God. We have to somehow tap into this inner part of our heart. This is because even if we get to that external level of our heart and we're able to break through that external level of our heart, there's still this inner part of our heart, which is going to be covered up in klipa. And this is, and it's in a way of captivity and exile. So how do we explain this, and how do we go about this? How do we go about circumcising our heart? So interestingly, when we talk about the first level, which we know of as milah, so it says, like we quoted before, that verse from Devarim, umaltem et aglat levavchem, that you yourselves you shall remove this foreskin of your heart. So it's something active. It's something that we can do. And again, the way we do this, spiritually speaking, is by meditating upon God, learning about God, all of these things, trying to like really channel our intellects in this godly way so that it can then translate and permeate into our hearts. However, when it comes to this more thinner membrane, this is something that's very difficult for us to do. It's not something that it's so simple that we can just like go and channel our passions towards God. This is something a little bit more essential to our being. It's not so rational. And About this, we actually see there's another verse that talks about this also in Devarim chapter 30 verse 6, where it says, "Umal Hashem Elokecha et levavcha chulei la'avat Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha leman chayecha." Where it says here, interestingly, it says that God will circumcise your hearts to come bring you to love God with your entire heart and your entire soul for the sake of your life. So here we see that when it comes to that external level of the circumcision, the milah, that's in our hands. That's something that we can do. We can actively do it in a very literal way, where we go and we learn Torah and we think about God, and that causes us to curb these more intellectual passions. But when we talk about this more internal, more subtle level of the umka deliba, the depths of the heart, this level of priya, as we call it. This is something that only God can do. Why? Because really, ultimately, God is your whole life. You're not your own whole life. God is your whole life. So this is why when we're talking about this more essential level that really is our life force, our life being, this is God. So God has the power to do this. And so this is why we can see now that this level of love that comes from the inner depths of the heart, from the umka deliba, the inner part of the heart, is totally above intellect. And so that's why now we can understand that when Mashiach will come, then it says that Mashiach's going to come with hesech hadat, that it's going to, like the simple translation of that, it's going to come when we least expect it, when we're like not paying, when we're distracted, basically. So why? It seems kind of like, oh, it's going to be a surprise. Mashiach's here. But another way to understand it is it's specifically not going to be something. It's when our das is distracted, when our intellect is not going to be the focus anymore. We're actually going to be tapping into something that's above intellect, because that's how Mashiach can come. That's how redemption can happen, is from this level that is beyond ourselves, beyond our own capacities, our own intellectual abilities. Is from God Himself. And this is the aspect of the revelation of the inner aspect that's universal to everybody, and the freeing, the liberation of the Shekhinah, the general Shekhinah from exile and from captivity forever and ever. So it's not just about our own like inner work of our inner heart being revealed, but it's actually a collective thing. Like, we're all part of this collective process. And now the Alter Rebbe focuses on the more individual part, and he says that just like collectively, there's this process that's going to happen where collectively the Shekhinah is going to be redeemed. We actually see that in the individual spark of the Shekhinah that's found in every single Jewish person, it actually does emerge out of its exile and captivity for a moment during prayer. So interestingly, we get this kind of glimpse of this freedom and liberation during prayer, specifically when a person prays with their heart, like they have the service of the heart from the depth of the heart, from this aspect of the inner part that is usually concealed by the foreskin, and it soars upwards to cleave to God with a great, great, great passion, which is in this way of, for the sake of your life, like this kind of a willingness to give up our lives for God. And this is what we can think of as the hesech hadat, the distraction of mind within a person. So when a person prays with great intensity from this level that's like not rational, but actually just from the depths of their heart, then this is we're tapping into this. This is a way that we can actually tap into momentarily this freedom from the exile of the inner part of our heart. But what we need to understand is this is a gift that's given to us from above. It's not something that's generated from our own place. So the external level of the circumcision, that's something that we generate through our own efforts, through our own intellects and all of that. But the inner circumcision, this is coming from God. This is a gift from God, from a way of the supernal face of God, which we can understand this by, like, this is what is alluded to, and this is what citation that we brought previously from Bamidbar chapter 6 verse 25, where it says Ye'er Hashem panav elecha, that may God's face shine upon you. This is from the blessing of the Kohanim, that God's face, again, panim is pnimios, it's the inner part, will shine upon you. So, and also umal Hashem elokecha, that Hashem will circumcise you. So again, this is something that God does. God is the one who circumcises the inner part, who performs this priya upon us. However, even though, yes, it's God, if this is a gift from God, then there's this principle of Esarusa de la Ela and Esarusa de la Tata. So there's Esarusa de la Ela is an arousal from above, and Esarusa de la Tata is an arousal from below. These are terms that come up a lot in Chassidus a lot. And basically, an arousal from above means like it's an arousal from God. God's initiating it. And Esarusa de la Tata is our initiation. And we know that often it's like our spiritual service down here initiates our Esarusa de la Tata, our arousal from below, elicits an arousal from above. And this is likened to the aspect of Mein Nukvin, which is feminine waters. So I spoke about this briefly in the introduction, that there's this idea, and I'll just go on here just to give another thing that Alter Rebbe says, that there's no drop of rain this is from the Zohar. There's this idea, there's no drop of rain that descends from above without first 2 drops ascending from below. So like, what does this mean exactly? Is that basically it's like, if we think about it in terms of like relationships, male, female, then often where it seems like the male is the one that's chasing, the male is the initiator and all of that, it's actually in a certain sense the female, because the female needs to show that she's receptive. She needs to smile. She needs to, back in the day, they would have a thing that the woman would like drop her handkerchief while she was walking down the street if she saw somebody that she liked, and she would leave it to him then to go pick it up. And that would be a sign that he was welcome to come and approach her. So with us too, in our relationship with God, in this sense, we're the woman. So while it is God that chases us, so to speak, it is God that comes and ultimately redeems us. It does start with us. It starts with us making ourselves available. And so thus we need to, continues the Alter Rebbe, we need to begin the process of this circumcision, even though it's ultimately going to be God that's doing this deeper, more essential subtle circumcision to us. We need to first do the first parts. First, we need to start with the Mila. We need to engage in this intellectual meditation and all that stuff, and remove that coarse level that's covering up the inner aspect of the heart. Like we can't even get to the inner aspect without first removing the outer aspect. So we remove the outer aspect, and then we come to the inner aspect, what's this inner aspect? The inner aspect is this love of God, which is like for the sake of our lives, where it's like our whole entire lives are dependent upon God. There's this acknowledgement of that. And right now it's found in Galus, it's found in exile in this world, which it's like people feel they sacrifice their lives, God forbid, for things here in this world, because there's, God created it in such a way that it can go in either direction. It's zelu matzeh, it's called in Hebrew. So now we come to tzedakah. So tzedakah, this is like kind of like the bringing it all home. The amazing power of tzedakah is that when a person gives tzedakah from their money, which is their life, their livelihood, their vitality, because like we described in the introduction, a person's whole entire life is within, it's infused in the money that they have, then this actually causes this removal of this foreskin. And this is even especially when a person might think, okay, I understand that for somebody who's very rich, who has a lot of money to give to tzedakah. What about somebody that's poor? Do they really have to give tzedakah? So the Alter Rebbe actually says that if a person is limited with money and is like, for at this specific time, they don't have a lot of money. So then all the more so, it means that he's really giving of his life. So it's like, if it hurts for you to give tzedakah, if it's like you could either be using this money to buy food for yourself or to give to somebody else, that's when it's really going to hurt. And that really shows, that you're giving, that shows that this money is really you. It's really your life. And especially if you work for yourself. So the Alter Rebbe is acknowledging the fact that some people, their money doesn't come from their own work. Regardless, your money is your life in a sense, but especially if you're the type of person who works for yourself, that you work for your own income. Because interestingly, what the Alter Rebbe says is, he says it's impossible that if a person is really works, and they're really involved in their work, then they're going to be involved in this work on this level of the umka deliba, this level of the depths of your heart. So think about that. I don't know how many of you can relate to that. I could relate to it in a certain sense, that it's like when I'm working in my business, I'm trying to build up my business. It's like I'm putting my entire self into it. I'm really getting into it in a full way. My whole self is involved in the building of my business, in making sure everything runs smoothly, all of that stuff. So that same level, my full self, the money that I generate from that money now has my entire self in it. It has my umka deliba in it. So if I give it to tzedakah, that's my way of sacrificing it, of circumcising my heart, that level of the heart, to God. And we see that this is the way of the world with people, business people involved in the world. People really, it's like the first question people often ask people is, what do you do for a living? This is like the definition of who a person is, right? And so now when a person then goes and takes this money that they generate from their work and they distribute it in this like very free-flowing fashion, and they give to God with great gladness and goodness of the heart, this is how we can actually redeem our souls from this place of captivity, from the pit. Meaning that that this aspect of the inner recess of the heart, which was found in exile and captivity within the klipos, whether we're talking about the coarse klipa or the more refined, subtle level of klipa, this is a way that we can redeem it from there. And now the Alter brings a citation which says, this is from Mishlei, chapter 4, verse 23, guard your heart with the greatest vigilance. That's the literal translation, the simple translation of it. But if we look at it also, that you should guard your heart from any mishmar. The word mishmar means a prison. So meaning that we have to guard our hearts from prison. And how do we do this? We do this through tzedakah. So the way that we redeem ourselves from the external forces is through giving tzedakah. And this is the idea of priya. This is the idea of that inner aspect of the circumcision that we do, which is interestingly in Hebrew, again, a lot of interesting etymology today. The word priya in Hebrew, it's related to the word priyat chov, like removing a debt. Because basically it's like we're born into this world like owing a debt, so that it's like we become indebted to the forces of evil. So it's like when you kind of like, when a person devotes their life to something, basically, then it's like another way of saying it is like we become indebted to them. Like now it's like you have to work a certain amount of hours at your business. You have to call that client. You have all these things that you're like a slave to, basically. And it's like, how do we remove this debt? We remove it through removing ourselves, through redeeming ourselves with tzedakah. So that is the end of the section today. And so just to sum it all up, bring it all together, the main idea is tzedakah, is the great power of tzedakah. And the great power of tzedakah that it has is that it allows us to tap into this level of the deeper circumcision of the heart that is usually otherwise inaccessible to us. So we know, again, there are two levels of circumcision, whether we're talking about physical circumcision or emotional, like the circumcision of the heart. The outer layer is what's known as milah, which is the outer foreskin. This is spiritually, this is when we remove we remove our coarse basic desires for the world, and we instead channel them towards God. And this can be brought about through our intellectual study and contemplation and meditation upon God. And then there's the inner part, the pnimius halev, the umka deliba, the depths of the heart. And this is much harder for us to tap into. It's really covered up because it's really in exile. We here in this world, we're like in this confusing world where our passions, our deepest passions even sometimes, are for things that have nothing to do with God. And to be able to tap into this level, to be able to circumcise this level is not so easy. And it's not even something that we can do on our own. This can only come about through God, with God's help, with God's effort. But we can assist him. We can initiate the process. The way we initiate the process, first of all, during prayer, it's a time that we can actually tap into this on some level when we pray from this depths of our heart, when we kind of like get in touch with our true self, our true godly self. But secondly, through giving tzedakah, because giving tzedakah is our life. Our money is our life, in a sense. It's our livelihood. It's what we put all our energy into, making a living, And even if you don't work for yourself, it's like the food that you buy, the clothing that you have, that all of these things, it is what defines you as a person. So when we channel this, when we give tzedakah, this is our way of actually like showing God, like we're sacrificing our lives. And this gives God the opportunity to then come and circumcise that inner part of our heart. So that is it for today. And we will continue with this section tomorrow, and I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.